almost knocked over by their pandemonium, he shouted that they were ill-bred and worse behaved, and that as they were no credit to their families, they ought to be ashamed. With my usual self-restraint, I was on my feet in seconds. I thundered that it was he who ought to be ashamed for frightening small children. He spun around, finger raised to scold me, then stopped, as if in confusion. Then he smiled, Mama, and bowed to me, a deep oriental bow. Well, said he, I was under the impression that with the exception of my countrymen, the passengers on this voyage were largely German and Austrian. I suppose I shall have to watch my tongue. It was only then that I realized with astonishment what he'd grasped first, that we were both speaking English. If you intend to continue berating the children, indeed you will, I drew myself up and answered, as though conversing in English with a Chinese aboard an Italian liner plowing the Red Sea were an everyday thing. Perhaps you'd at least consider insulting them in your native language, so they might learn something they'll find useful in their new home. At this he smiled again, but looked quizzical, and inquired where their new home might be. When I told him Shanghai, he seemed truly surprised. Madam, Shanghai is under Japanese occupation. Civil war rages in the countryside, and foreigners abandon China on every ship that sails. I understood my fellow passengers to be refugees from oppression, but Shanghai seems an odd choice of new home. Choice? We are Jews, sir. We have no choice. The countries we leave hound us, steal from us, throw us behind bars. We're ordered into exile and would gladly go, but no place will have us except Shanghai. I swept my hand toward the boys. These children leave home, family, and friends for an unknown place where the language, the streets, the very food will be wholly new to them. Yet they laugh and play, and you dare take them to task for it. Finally reining in the runaway horse that is my temper, I felt myself redden up to my scalp and was appalled at my effrontery. The gentleman regarded me, his face grave. He asked if there were truly no other place for us. I thought Shanghai was a transit port, he said, a stop on the way to someplace more hospitable. Surprised by the catch in my throat as I spoke, I told him hospitable was not a sentiment the world felt toward Jews. He kept his gaze on me for another brief time. Then he turned to the boys, who'd been watching in part fear, part fascination. He bowed, at which they took a step back, as though afraid of what might happen next, and requested that I convey his apologies. I told them in German they might continue their game, but must take care not to disturb their fellow passengers, and I shooed them off. The gentleman turned again to me, and again he smiled. I am Chen Kairong. Chen is my family name, and so, if we're to be friends, you must call me Kairong. I'd be honored if you'd take tea with me. And that, Mama, is how I've come to know about Chinese tea. I receded to my deck chair. Mr. Chen Kairong settled himself also and spoke to a steward. As we awaited our tea, he glanced at my book. I'd been reading Thomas Hardy to improve my English. He asked whether the author was a favorite of mine. When I told him Mr. Hardy was rather dark for my taste, he agreed, and asked what writer in that language I enjoyed. And Mama, now you'll laugh, because what popped from my mouth was William Shakespeare. All the times you despaired of me, devouring Wilkie Collins while King Lear gathered dust, and now to a stranger on the deck of a ship I tell such a fib. But this gentleman holds himself with such grace, Mama. His English is so good and his manners so refined. I wanted him to think well of me. I then asked if there was an English author he particularly admired, and he responded with P.G. Wodehouse. Do you know this writer, Mama? I don't, and I told him so. His answer, well, I commend him to you. I think you'll find him compatible. Later, I sought out the works of Mr. Wodehouse in the ship's library, but they are not carried. Our tea tray arrived, bare of milk, sugar, or lemon. The accompanying cakes were entirely unfamiliar. Mr. Chen Kairong instructed me to swirl the teacup to release the scent as we do with wine. I found the tea's golden color and sweet fragrance appealing, and discovered it to be delicious, though I was less successful in enjoying the cakes. Never mind, he said. At least now the very food of China isn't wholly new to you. At that, I couldn't contain a smile, though I tried to conceal it. He continued, I confess to a weakness for Linzertort myself. Tell me, Miss Gilder, are all Jews as firm in their opinions and as outspoken as yourself? If so, Shanghai can look forward to some excitement.